My name is Mia Harrison. I'm 29 years old, and I used to be beautiful, not just pretty. The kind of beauty people whispered about in the hallways of fashion shows. The kind that landed you on the cover of glossy magazines without even trying. At least, that's what they told me. Back then, I thought beauty was everything. My face was my currency, my security, my entire identity. I spent more hours in front of a mirror than I cared to admit, adjusting angles, practicing expressions, memorizing the light that flattered me most. I was good at being looked at. It made me feel real. But that was before the fire. It was supposed to be a quiet night. My best friend and longtime photographer, Allison, had just finished shooting a campaign for a sustainable skincare brand, and we decided to celebrate. Nothing crazy, just dinner, a glass of wine or two, and catching up. I hadn't seen her in months. Our careers had taken us in different directions. "I missed you," she said, raising her glass across the table. I smiled. "You miss me or you miss shooting me?" "Same thing," she laughed, brushing her curly hair behind her ear. It felt normal, simple. The kind of moment you only realize was perfect after everything falls apart. We took separate cabs home. That probably saved her life. The fire started in the electrical panel. I woke up to smoke, thick, acidic, blinding. I remember crawling on the floor, reaching for the doorknob, only to find it burning hot. I panicked. The next few minutes are a blur of heat, coughing, screaming. And then nothing. They told me later I was found unconscious, half hanging out of a shattered window. A neighbor pulled me out before the fire department arrived. Third-degree burns covered the left side of my face, my neck, part of my shoulder. My modeling agency dropped me within a week. Sponsors followed. Brands that once begged for a smile now pretended I didn't exist. But worse than that was the moment I saw myself for the first time after the bandages came off. Dr. Gray, the plastic surgeon, stood next to me, speaking softly. "We did the best we could, Mia. The grafts took well. It's going to take time, but you're healing." I nodded, even though I couldn't hear half of what he said. My heart was beating in my throat. I could feel it, the anticipation, the dread. He handed me the mirror, and everything stopped. The face looking back at me was not mine. The smooth skin was gone. I in its place. Red, uneven flesh. Patches of discoloration. A twisted cheekbone. My left eyebrow was gone entirely. I remember whispering, "This isn't me." Dr. Gray didn't respond right away. Then he said the one thing that stuck with me. "No, Mia. This is you, too. It's just a side you haven't met yet." The following weeks were a haze. I stayed inside, avoided my phone, ghosted my friends. Allison texted me every day. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to be anyone except beautiful Mia. And now that she was gone, who was left? I cried out a lot, sometimes without even knowing why. I hated the way people looked at me on the street, some out of pity, some out of horror, others just unsure how to react. I started wearing scarves even in summer, sunglasses even when it rained. One day, I caught my reflection in a store window. I didn't look away, and I said, quietly but clearly, "If I have to live like this, I'm going to figure out how." That was the moment it started. Not the healing, not the acceptance, but the fight. Some mornings I still woke up expecting to feel the same silk of my pillowcase, the weight of my hair across my shoulder, the usual flutter of anticipation about what the day might bring. I'd stretch, rub my face, and then my fingers would find the texture. That uneven, foreign terrain, the scars. Reality always returned like cold water, sudden, humiliating, and cruel. I became a ghost in my own life. I barely spoke to anyone. My parents called constantly for Victoria Island, but I sent them the same text every week. "I'm okay. Just need more time." But I wasn't okay, and I didn't need time, I needed courage. It was Allison who finally broke through. She showed up at my apartment one rainy afternoon, her bangs dripping with water, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, like always. I didn't open the door at first. I watched her through the peephole as she stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "Mia," she said loud enough for me to hear, "I brought Thai food and backup batteries for your emotional breakdown." A part of me wanted to hide under the bed. Another part of me missed her. I opened the door just wide enough for her to see one eye. She smiled gently. "Hey." I stepped back and let her in. We sat on the floor with takeout boxes between us. She didn't stare. She didn't pretend not to notice my face either. She just looked at me like I was still me. After a few minutes of silence, she said, "You know what's weird? You still make that tiny face when something's too spicy." I blinked. "I do." "Yeah," she grinned. "Your nose crinkles. It's exactly the same." I didn't say anything, I just stared at her. For the first time in months, I felt seen, and not just looked at. She picked up a piece of tofu with her chopsticks. "You're still you, Mia. I don't care what your face looks like." I swallowed hard. "Everyone else does." She paused, then said, "Screw everyone else. You know, when I started photographing you, it wasn't because of your cheekbones. It was because you had this spark, like you knew who you were. That hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in your eyes." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. That night, after she left, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, I studied myself, really studied. Not with the cold precision of a model checking her angles, but like someone trying to understand a stranger. The scars were still red and raw. The skin on the left side of my face tightened when I moved. My mouth had a slight asymmetry I never had before, but Allison was right about my eyes. They hadn't changed. The next morning, I opened my laptop and typed something into Google I never imagined I'd search. Burn survivors modeling community support. Pages of results came up that I clicked randomly, nervously, until I found a forum. Photos, stories, men and women with faces far more disfigured than mine. Smiling, dancing, living. Some of them posted selfies with messages like, "Beauty is not symmetry, it's survival." They told me I'd never walk the runway again. I made my own runway. I sat there for nearly an hour, scrolling, heart pounding, breathing shallow, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I took a photo. No filter, no makeup, just me, in the morning light, with everything showing. I uploaded it to the forum with just 5 words. "Learning to see me again." I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Within 10 minutes, the comments began pouring in. "You're radiant." "Welcome back, warrior." "The spark in your eyes says everything." I started to cry, softly this time. Not the heavy, aching sobs of grief, but something lighter, warmer, like tiny cracks forming in a thick wall. Maybe I wasn't gone. Maybe I was just beginning. Leaving the apartment for the first time felt like preparing for battle. I stood by the door for nearly an hour, scarf in hand, sunglasses ready. Keys clenched so tight in my palm they left marks. I had practiced walking around inside for weeks, but outside, that was different. The outside world didn't just reflect you back. It judged you. Allison had offered to come with me, but I said no. I needed to do this alone. If I couldn't face a coffee shop 3 blocks away, how was I ever going to face a world that once cheered for my cheekbones? I wrapped the scarf loosely around my lower face, tugged a beanie low over my forehead, and opened the door. Vancouver in spring is oddly alive. Rain-washed sidewalks, blooming cherry blossoms, the scent of damp earth. The world kept moving, unaware of the storm I was dragging behind me. Each step felt like walking on a wire. People passed me. Some glanced. A few stared a beat too long. One little girl pointed from her stroller and asked, "Mommy, why does her face look like that?" The mother shushed her quickly and pulled her away. I stopped walking. My heart was thudding in my ears. Should I go back? No. I kept going. I made it to the cafe, a cozy, tucked away place called Bitter and Bright. where I used to write in the mornings before shoots. The owner, a gentle guy named Liam with sleeves of tattoos and a voice like warm cinnamon, glanced up as I stepped in. He blinked once, clearly surprised, then smiled softly. "Mia." I froze. He remembered me. He didn't flinch. "Glad to see you again," he said. I hesitated. "You? Remember?" "Course I do. You always ordered that cinnamon oat latte and left sticky notes in the corner booth. Still there, by the way." I looked toward the back. The booth was empty. "Same order?" he asked, already turning toward the espresso machine. I nodded, voice too tight to speak. I sat down and stared at the window. The reflection was blurred, filtered by sunshine and raindrops. People came and went. Some noticed, most didn't. When Liam brought over the drink, he set it down gently and said, "Takes guts to show up again." I glanced up, startled. "You mean, like this?" He shrugged. "No, just being seen at all. For any of us." I stared at him. He wasn't talking about my scars. "Not exactly. Thanks," I murmured, unsure what else to say. He smiled and tapped the table. "You're still Mia. That's enough." I stayed there for almost 2 hours, just existing. At one point, a couple of college students sat near me. One of them whispered something to the other while glancing in my direction. The second girl elbowed her and hissed, "Don't be rude." It stung, but not the way it used to, because this time I wasn't hiding. I finished my latte, dropped a tip, and as I stood to leave, I walked past Liam and said quietly, "Hey, thank you." He just nodded. That evening, I opened the forum again. My photo had over 100 replies now. Messages from people across the world: India, Brazil, Sweden, New Zealand. Survivors, supporters, strangers. One post stopped me cold. "Your courage gave me the strength to walk into my daughter's school today, without makeup on my burns. I thought people would stare. They didn't. Even if they had, I would have walked in anyway." Her name was Natalie, from Manchester. I messaged her directly that we started talking. Over the next week, I went out again. Grocery store, pharmacy, the library. Each time, it got a little easier. Not because people stopped staring, but because I stopped letting their gaze define me. Allison called one night. "So, are you ready?" "For what?" "For something new." I hesitated. "New how?" "I signed us up for a small community art exhibit next month. It's called Reshape. Theme is transformation. You can do whatever you want. Write, sculpt, paint. I'm doing portraits of people I love. And you want to shoot me?" I asked, half laughing, half terrified. She paused. "No, I want you to shoot yourself. From your lens. The Mia no one else gets to see." I didn't answer right away, but I already knew my answer. That was Allison's thing, not mine. She'd been the one behind the lens, while I was always in front of it, posing, turning, smiling on cue. I'd learned how to be looked at, not how to look. But now, standing in front of the full-length mirror with the camera in my hands, I wasn't a subject. I was a storyteller. The art exhibit was in 3 weeks. Allison had submitted the theme, transformation. The gallery space was small, nestled in East Vancouver near Commercial Drive, but it didn't matter. It wasn't about recognition. .it was about showing up. I set up the shot in my bedroom, natural light pouring through the window. No makeup. No hiding. I aimed the camera at myself and froze. The red button waited. I waited. My reflection stared back, calm, scarred, tired, and yet unbroken. I pressed the shutter. That was the first photo. Over the next week, I took dozens more. Not just of my face, but my hands holding a teacup, my back as I looked out the window, my fingers over the scar on my neck. There was a language in those images, quiet, tender, honest. I wasn't trying to be pretty. I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just being real. Allison came over one afternoon to help me select which pieces to submit. She flipped through the shots on my laptop, nodding, her lips slightly parted. God, Mia, she whispered. This is you. Finally, I laughed. Which part? The one where I'm staring at my coffee cup, like I just discovered time travel. No, she smiled. The one where you're not apologizing. 2 days before the gallery submission, I went to the print shop to get the photos developed. A small place on 8th Avenue, owned by a soft-spoken man named Joseph who wore oversized sweaters and smelled like ink and eucalyptus. While I waited at the counter, someone walked in behind me. Excuse me, a warm voice said. Are you printing for the Reshape show? I turned around at a man, probably in his early 30s, stood there with paint on his hands and a portfolio tucked under one arm. Yeah, I said, pulling my scarf up instinctively. He didn't blink, just smiled. I'm Ben, he said. I'm showing some sculpture work. First time putting my stuff out there. Mia, I replied, voice cautious. He glanced at my prints still coming through the machine. Are those yours? I nodded. They're raw, but beautiful. I was so used to people skimming past me, averting their eyes, forcing politeness. But not him. He didn't look through me. He looked at me, like I wasn't a before and after story, like I was just present. Thanks, I said quietly. He smiled again, looking forward to seeing them on the wall. That night, I dreamed of my old life. A runway, flashes, shouts of photographers calling my name. But in the dream, no one could see me. I walked and walked, but the lights passed right through me. I was invisible. Then, in the dream, a hand reached out from the crowd, not to touch me, but to hand me a camera. And I took it. The day of the exhibit arrived faster than I expected. I stood in the small gallery with my photos hanging in a neat row. There was no title on the wall, just my name, Mia Harrison. People came and went. Some lingered, some didn't. A few asked questions that I answered simply. Their self-portraits, about learning how to look again. Near the end of the evening, I spotted Ben. He stood in front of my photos for a long time. Then he walked over. You didn't flinch, he said. What? In your work, you didn't flinch. That's rare. I looked down, embarrassed. I did. Just off camera. He chuckled. Fair. Then he handed me a small folded paper. It's a sketch. Of you. I didn't ask permission. I hope that's okay. I unfolded it after he left. It was a pencil sketch, rough, unfinished, but powerful. Me sitting in the cafe, staring into the light with a look that I didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Peace. Maybe it had been there all along. I just hadn't seen it yet. Ben started showing up. Not in the forced, overeager kind of way. He'd just appear, sometimes at Bitter and Bright, sometimes at the gallery, sometimes walking the same street I happened to be on. Like the universe was gently placing him in my line of sight again and again. We started talking. At first it was surface stuff, art, film, which cafes had the best almond croissants. But gradually, the conversations deepened. He told me about his sculptures, how he worked with found objects, broken glass, driftwood, things people throw away. He said, I like giving them a second purpose. I remember staring at him then, wondering if I was one of those things. One evening, he invited me to his studio. It was a sunlit warehouse space in Mount Pleasant, cluttered but alive. Metal scraps, sheets of textured glass, worn-out furniture. In the center stood a tall, half-finished piece, a figure rising out of a twisted spiral of copper wire. It looked like it was trying to climb out of itself. It's called Becoming, he said. I nodded slowly. It looks like it's in pain. He smiled gently. Sometimes becoming something new hurts. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. I looked at him. Do you always talk in metaphors? Only when I'm scared to say what I actually feel. That made me laugh. But something in me tensed too, because I was scared too. The more time we spent together, the more that fear grew. Not of him, of myself, of being seen up close, of someone touching my face and hesitating, of someone kissing me and feeling the uneven ridges of skin and pulling away, of someone saying the wrong thing and shattering whatever fragile strength I had rebuilt. I try to push it down to pretend, but fear always finds a way in. One night, after the gallery closed, we sat on a bench near the harbor. Vancouver's skyline shimmered in the water like broken glass, beautiful in its distortion. Ben leaned toward me slightly, elbows on knees. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, wary. "Do you remember what it felt like? Before all of it? Before the fire?" I thought for a moment. Yes. I remember feeling powerful when I walked into a room. I could turn heads with just a glance. People treated me like I mattered. And now, I swallowed. I feel like I have to prove that I matter. Like I'm not allowed to take up space unless I earn it with grace or courage or something noble. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "That's not your job, Mia. Existing is enough." No one had ever said that to me before. I turned away, afraid he'd see how close I was to crying. A few nights later, we were in my apartment. It was raining outside, that kind of soft Vancouver drizzle that blankets the city in quiet. I had just shown him a new series of photographs, hands of strangers I had met recently, each of them bearing scars. Burned scars, surgical scars, emotional ones inked into tattoos. The series was called Evidence. He stood behind me as I scrolled through them. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I want to take your photo." I froze. "Why?" "Because I want to see you. Not just the version you show the world. The version you hide, too." I turned around slowly. "Ben," I said, voice shaking. "I'm scared." "I know," he replied. "Me too." I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. He walked over, knelt in front of me, and gently, so gently, took the scarf from my neck. He looked at me without blinking, not with pity, not with fascination, just presence. He lifted the camera and waited for my permission. I nodded. Click. Later that night, after he left, I looked at the image on his camera he'd sent me. It was just me. Scarred up, barefaced, quiet, but not small. There was power in it. Not because I looked strong, but because I didn't look like I was hiding. And for the first time, I didn't want to delete that version of me. I wanted to remember her. It was Allison's idea. Again, "There's a local storytelling event next month," she said one morning over coffee. "Theme is becoming. They're looking for speakers." I blinked. "You want me to talk? In front of people?" "You don't have to," she said. "But maybe you want to." I didn't answer that I didn't have to. She knew I was already thinking about it. I sat in my apartment for days, trying to write something, anything. I started with the fire, then rewrote it to begin with the modeling career, then cut that too. Everything felt either too polished or too painful, until one night I stopped trying to make it sound right, and just started writing the truth. I wrote it like a letter, to the girl I used to be, to the mirror, to the scar I tried to erase. I didn't edit it. I didn't rehearse it. I just felt it. The night of the event, the room was packed. A small stage, no spotlight, just a mic and 30 or so people sitting in folding chairs. I stood backstage, palms sweating, scarf in my hand, not wrapped around me, just held. My armor was optional now. Ben gave me a soft smile from the second row. Allison sat beside him, hands clasped in her lap. When they called my name, I stepped up, took the mic, and for a moment I froze. Then I took a breath, looked out at the crowd, and said, "My name is Mia Harrison. You might have seen me before, but I don't think anyone ever really saw me. Not even me." I spoke for 12 minutes. I talked about the silence that came after the fire, the mirrors I avoided, the pitying glances, the well-meaning people who told me I was still beautiful, as if that was the only way I could matter. I talked about how I confused being looked at with being loved, How I used to measure my worth by symmetry, by approval, by applause. And how none of those things showed up for me when I needed them most. Then I talked about what did show up. People who sat with me in the quiet. Artists who turned pain into color. Strangers who said, "I see you," and meant it. And I ended with this. I thought I lost everything when I lost my face. But what I really lost was the mask. And underneath that mask, there was someone real. Someone still learning. Someone still whole. There was silence after I finished. Then, applause. Not the kind that comes out of obligation. The kind that comes from hearts that just shifted a little. Ben met me after the show, sketchbook in hand. "I drew you again," he said. "Yeah." I smiled. Do I still have that nose wrinkle when I think too hard? He laughed. "No, this time I drew you standing in the rain. No scarf, no umbrella, just standing." I looked at the sketch, and for once, I saw exactly what he saw. A woman, no longer hiding, no longer waiting for permission to be seen. Weeks passed, then months that I started speaking more. Sometimes in schools, sometimes in art spaces. Not as the burn victim turned inspiration. Not as the girl who made a comeback. Just Mia, a woman who lived a life with shadows, but also with light. I started taking portraits of others like me. People with visible scars. Invisible ones. People with stories carved into their skin, their hearts, their silence. We called the project Uncovered. Sometimes I still miss who I used to be. Sometimes I walk past old magazines and think, that used to be me. But now I don't grieve her. I thank her. She survived enough to get me here. And now, I don't need to be looked at. I just need to be seen.